On June 12, 1962, 3 men escaped from the famous Alcatraz prison and were never found again. The final fate of Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers remains a mystery, but their daring escape from the highest security prison in the United States remains captivating, according to what the BBC said, which republished an investigation it conducted at the time from the scene of the events. In May 1964, journalist Michael Charlton of BBC Panorama took the most terrifying journey into the world of crime, as it was described at the time, across the choppy waters of San Francisco Bay, to see the notorious prison island Alcatraz and follow the story, which it was considered the smartest escape. Nicknamed The Rock, the federal prison held some of the most dangerous criminals in the United States and was seen as an impregnable fortress. But in the early hours of June 12, 1962, 3 men achieved what was thought impossible. They escaped. Alcatraz prison was originally a sea defense fort to protect the entrance to the Gulf. During the American Civil War, due to the island's isolation, the steep slopes, and the fast, cold currents that surrounded it, Confederate prisoners were held there. In the early 20th century, it was rebuilt as a military prison, and in the 1930s, when the United States attempted to deal with the rampant organized crime that flourished during Prohibition, and the Department of Justice took charge of it. Soon the most feared convicts began arriving from the federal prison system. Among its most famous guests were notorious gangsters Al Capone, Mickey Cohen, and George Machine Gun Kelly, as well as convicted murderer Robert Stroud, who later became known as the Birdman of Alcatraz. Most of those there were the kind of men who would not, they can be detained in a regular prison. Frank Lee Morris arrived on the island. Orphaned at the age of 11 and convicted of his first crime at the age of 13, he spent most of his life in and out of various reformatories. He was considered highly intelligent and a hardened criminal. He had a list of drug and armed robbery charges and frequently escaped from prison. When he was sent to Alcatraz prison in January 1960, he immediately began thinking about escaping. And the brothers John and Clarence Anglin and Alan West, who were convicted of bank robbery, joined him in his cell. Prison inmates talked to each other at night as they lived in adjacent cells. With Morris taking the lead, the 4 prisoners begin to prepare a complex and daring plan to escape. Over several months, the men carved out the salt-damaged concrete around the vent beneath their sinks. Using metal spoons they stole from the dining hall, a drill made from a vacuum cleaner motor and discarded saw blades, they dug until they reached an unguarded passage. To mask the noise of the drill, Morris played the accordion during the daily hour designated for playing music for the prisoners. Once they made a hole large enough to crawl through into the corridor, they climbed to the empty upper level of the cell block and set up a secret workshop. To hide the holes in the cell walls, they made fake paper grids from prison library magazines. Once they arrived at the workshop, they set about constructing a makeshift rubber raft, measuring 6 by 14 feet, and life jackets made from more than 50 stolen raincoats. To seal the rubber, they melted it using the prison's hot steam pipes, then turned a concertina machine into an inflatable device, raft and made oars from pieces of plywood.